Welcome back to Sailing El Jaleo! This week I'm going to tackle a project that has been a thorn in my side ever since I bought El Jaleo, and that is the port side fiberglass water tank. It was in poor shape when I bought the boat. I tried to fix it and that repair did not hold. It actually failed as soon as we left Delaware City last year. And now with the new washing machine, I need to get this thing up and running because I need the water storage. So I guess we might as well go ahead and get right into it. Grab a drink, climb aboard, and let's get going. This first video I actually shot a year ago, and it's the moment when I discovered that one of the water tanks was leaking. And it is also 100% dry. Which, to be honest with you, is quite a bit shocking. I know why it's shocking. Because it's empty. How in the hell? There's water in the bottom. How in the hell is that tank empty? And it looks like it's siphoned right down to the pickup tube down there. As you can tell, I was a bit perplexed when I found that empty tank, and I didn't know where the water went. I did find water in the bilge, so I assumed it got down into the bilge somehow. And at first I thought it siphoned down there, but then after examining the system, that tank was completely shut off. There was no way for that water to siphon down unless there was something wrong with that ball valve, which I didn't think was the case. And when I got down to the Solomons, I actually filled the tank back up to see if I could determine if it was leaking or if it was siphoning, what was going on. And I actually did find the leak. So I didn't know exactly where in the tank was leaking, but I knew that it was leaking because there's a PVC tube that runs through the center of those tanks, and some water lines run through it for the water maker. And there was water coming out of that PVC pipe, so I knew there was a crack or a void somewhere in that tank that was allowing water to escape. I just didn't know where it was. And I decided not to mess with it. I did have some of the potable water epoxy with me, but I don't know if you guys have seen the fiberglass repair video, but at the end I realized that I kind of siliconed down the lids with an adhesive, so yeah, it wasn't the best choice for putting the lids down. I didn't know how big of a pain in the butt it would be to get them off. And also that epoxy really stinks, and I didn't want to do that while we were aboard with the puppy dogs. And I still had one good water tank that had 35 gallons, and that could last me 3 to 4 weeks. And you know, that wasn't my drinking water or anything, and I had an extra 20 gallons on deck for the dogs' water and stuff. So we had plenty of water. I wasn't that concerned about it, but like I said, now with the washing machine, I'm definitely going to need that tank to be able to hold water. So first thing I needed to do was to get the lid off and see if I could find where it was leaking. And you can see when I pried off the tank lid, it actually removed the epoxy from around the top of the tank. So I would say that's a pretty strong adhesive silicone there. But I was able to scrape the silicone and the epoxy off of the lid, so I'm going to be able to reuse that lid, which is great. And after that, I went ahead and cleaned the tanks. I just gave them a good scrubbing. And according to the instructions for this potable water epoxy, if you had coated the tank within the last year, you didn't need to prepare the surface in any way. You could just put on another coat. And I did a visual inspection and I couldn't see any cracks or voids in the tank or anything. So my plan of attack was just to do the corners and the edges. I did the entire tank with a fresh coat, and then I concentrated especially on the corners and the seams, and just hoped that I could find and cover wherever that crack was. After getting a fresh coat of the potable water epoxy on the tank, you actually have to let it sit for a week before you can water test it. So I let it sit for a week, and then I filled it up to check to see if it would hold water. After filling the tank, I checked in the bilge to see if I could find any signs of water, and this is an ugly shot. I was trying to see exactly where it was coming from, but much to my displeasure, there was a small leak. So I was kind of dejected and went back to the drawing board. I had two decisions to make. Obviously, this is coming in contact with wood, which is not good for the wood, but at the same time, I wanted the tank to drain naturally, so it would give me some information about where the leak might be. There were a couple of possibilities that I thought of. Either there's a crack somewhere along that central tube and it takes a certain amount of water pressure to open that crack, so the depth of the water in the tank that remains after the leak stops could give me some information, or the crack could actually be at the level where the water stops. So finding out where that water line was inside the tank when the leak stopped, I felt was more valuable information than getting some wood a little bit wet, which, you know, it'll eventually dry out, but it could potentially damage it. So over 2 days, it only took 1 day, but I left it for a couple of days so it could dry, to find out where that water level stopped. With the final water level being so low in the tank, I decided to stick a camera down in and look at the one spot where I couldn't look, and sure enough, that's where it was. That's, again, crappy video, but I was trying to find where the leak was, and I was happy because I found it. So I let this dry out for a couple more days, and then I started putting coats of the potable water epoxy over this spot, which is at the joint between the two, the upper and the lower tank. There's a little gap in the bottom so the water can travel between the two tanks, and it was in the one spot that I couldn't see is where the leak was. So over the next 3 days, I got 3 more coats in that area, and I inspected it again with the camera. It looked good. So then I just had to wait another week to test it out. By this point in time was beginning to run short. We really wanted to leave Delaware City by October 1st at the very latest. We actually wanted to leave on time for once. I know, a radical concept. And I was so sure that I found the source of the leak, I decided to make an executive decision to go ahead and seal down the lid before I could test it. And this would only save maybe 4 hours of time, but as we got closer and closer to the deadline, that 4 hours of time made a difference. It was a big gamble. I wasn't sure if the tank was going to hold water, and then I'd have to rip the lid back up again, which would have been a nightmare. And actually, I still don't know if the tank will hold water. When I'm recording this, I haven't tested it yet, so I'm sure that it will, though, right? Right? But anyway, I decided to seal down the tank the exact same way I did last time. And I know I originally said that was a mistake, and it kind of is. It was a little bit of a pain in the butt to get off, and it did pull up the epoxy from the fiberglass when I pried the lid up. But you know what it did? It kept the water in the tank, which was, it's kind of the point of the lid. So I decided to go ahead and use the same adhesive, 100% silicone caulk, to caulk the lid. And after I got the lid back down, I went ahead and stuck a camera inside to take a look around to see how it looked. And you'll notice the lid has been removed again.
You can then deal with the next consequence of your short-sightedness.
Just kidding. Actually, it worked out fine. The GoPro screwed up the footage. I did film testing the tank again, but you know, the GoPro's been dropped, I think, one too many times. Sometimes the footage gets a little scrambled, and it happened on that video. So after 8 days of letting it cure, I did fill the tanks, and after 4 days now, no leak. And I primed it. I tested it with the water pump, and everything seems to work fine. So we have 2 functional water tanks, which is going to be great. I've never had that the entire time. I've only had the one, so this is going to be kind of a, what would we call it, a game changer, a life changer, whatever. It's just going to be great. And that's all we have time for this week. I would like to give a massive shout out to my Patreon crew. My Patreon crew is Joan and Juddy Judnick, Val and Chris Alcorn, Denise and Eli Sackett, Sherry Erickson, Deb Shaw, and Matthew Spott. Thank you guys so very much. Without your support, I would not make these videos. And I do have one legacy patron member. Her name is Joan Linbo. Unfortunately, she has passed on, but she lives on in our hearts forever. We miss you, Joan. If you are interested in joining our Patreon crew, there is a link in the description down below. And that'll take you to our Patreon page where you can sign up, and there are hundreds of photos and videos, real-time updates, that kind of stuff to let you know where we're at and what's going on. And you would help support the channel, which would be awesome. If you do like our videos, please like, comment, and subscribe. That doesn't cost you anything, but it helps us out a bunch. And I hope you all are well, and we'll see you next week.